The arrogant offer the unexpected visitors. The detection stations on Luna picked up the anomaly first. A massive tier in space appeared just beyond Mars' orbit, and through it emerged a fleet that made Earth's combined space forces look like toys. 12 warships, each stretching over 2 kilometers in length, their hulls covered in gleaming silver armor that reflected the distant sun. They moved with purpose, arranging themselves in a formation that military analysts immediately recognized as a show of force rather than exploration. Captain Jennifer Walsh stood in the command center of the International Space Defense Headquarters in Colorado, watching the display screens with intense focus. She had served in the Space Defense Corps for 20 years, and her instincts told her this was not a friendly visit. The alien vessels had made no attempt to hide their arrival or appear non-threatening. They wanted Earth to see their power. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the communications station. "It's being broadcast on all frequencies, translated into every major Earth language simultaneously." Walsh nodded. "Put it on screen." The face that appeared was humanoid enough to be unsettling. Ambassador Zenth of the Keltharian Empire had pale gray skin, 3 eyes arranged in a triangle pattern, and a mouth that seemed to hold too many teeth. He wore ornate robes of deep purple, and behind him, Walsh could see other aliens moving about what appeared to be a command bridge, far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. "People of Earth," Zenth began, his voice carrying an undertone of barely concealed contempt. "We are the Keltharian Empire, supreme power in this sector of the galaxy. We have come to offer you a choice that will determine your species' future." The council gathering within 6 hours, the United Earth Council, had assembled in Geneva. Representatives from every nation sat in the circular chamber, their faces reflecting various degrees of concern, curiosity, and carefully hidden amusement. At the center table sat President Alexandra Marino of the United Earth Government. Flanked by military advisors and diplomatic staff, the Keltharian delegation had landed their shuttle in the designated area. And now Ambassador Zenth stood before the council, his 2 bodyguards flanking him. They were massive creatures, easily 3 meters tall, with armor that hummed with energy fields. The message was clear. The Keltharians expected to be feared. "Your world is primitive," Zenth announced without preamble, his translation device rendering his words in perfect English. "Your ships are slow. Your weapons are crude. Your understanding of galactic politics is non-existent. In the greater universe, you are children playing with dangerous toys." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Others remained perfectly still, their expressions unreadable. President Marino simply nodded, gesturing for Zenth to continue. "The Keltharian Empire has brought order to 400 systems," the ambassador continued, activating a holographic display that showed a vast swath of space marked in Keltharian colors. "We maintain peace through strength. We protect the weak from those who would exploit them. We offer this same protection to Earth." "How generous," Marino said, her tone perfectly neutral. "And what would this protection entail?" Zenth's 3 eyes gleamed. "You would become a protectorate of the Empire. You would pay tribute, naturally, to fund the fleet that guards your world. You would accept Keltharian governors to guide your political development. You would grant us mining rights to your system's resources. And you would, of course, provide soldiers for the Imperial military. Your species appears physically capable, if technologically backward." The Hidden Smiles General Marcus Chun, Earth's supreme military commander, leaned back in his chair. Those sitting closest to him noticed a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, quickly suppressed. Across the chamber, Admiral Sarah Kim caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. "And if we refuse this generous offer?" Moreno asked. Zenth's expression hardened. "Then you would face the consequences of your pride. The Keltharian Empire does not tolerate defiance. Your cities would burn. Your orbital facilities would be destroyed. Your population would learn the price of rejecting our protection. He paused, letting the threat sink in. We have done this before. 17 species have chosen destruction over wisdom. Their worlds now serve as reminders to others. I see, Marino said calmly. And you believe Earth would be the 18th? I believe Earth will be wiser than those who came before, Zenith replied. You have 72 hours to accept our terms. After that, our patience will be exhausted. What happened next surprised the Keltharian delegation. Instead of panic or angry outbursts, President Marino simply smiled. It was a small, almost sad smile, the kind a teacher might give a student who had badly misunderstood a lesson. Ambassador Zenth, we appreciate you traveling all this way to make your offer, she said. We will certainly need those 72 hours to consider it properly. In the meantime, perhaps we could offer you a tour of our world. It would be unfortunate if you made decisions based on incomplete information. Zenth's 3 eyes narrowed suspiciously, but he nodded. Very well. Show us your primitive civilization. Perhaps seeing your limitations will help you accept reality more quickly. The careful dance over the next 2 days. The Keltharian delegation was treated to what appeared to be a standard diplomatic tour. They visited the United Nations building in New York, saw museums and cultural centers, and met with various Earth leaders. Throughout it all, Ambassador Zenth grew increasingly confident that Earth would submit. The humans showed them nothing threatening, nothing that suggested military power beyond basic planetary defense, but there were small things that didn't quite add up. Details that a more observant species might have questioned. The underground facilities they weren't shown. The restricted zones around certain mountain ranges. The way human military officers seemed almost amused rather than intimidated when Zenth described Keltharian weapons technology. On the evening of the second day, Zenth met privately with some of his military commanders aboard their flagship. They are sheep, he declared. Peaceful, soft, completely unprepared for the realities of galactic power. They will accept our terms, or we will take what we want by force. Commander Vask, his chief military officer, was less certain. Something feels wrong, Ambassador. I've studied hundreds of pre-contact civilizations. They usually show more fear or more aggression. These humans are too calm. They're in denial, Zenth scoffed. When they see our fleet in battle formation tomorrow, when they understand we're serious, they'll break. They always do. But back on Earth, in the deep command bunkers that the Keltharians hadn't been shown, a very different conversation was taking place. President Moreno sat with her military council, and now the careful diplomatic masks were gone. How long since we opened the vaults? General Chun asked. 36 hours ago, Admiral Kim replied. The old systems are powering up. 20 minutes ago, we confirmed full operational status. Moreno looked at the ceiling, as if she could see through the rock and steel to the stars above. 235 years, she said quietly. That's how long we've kept the secret. That's how long humanity has pretended to be less than we are. The question is whether we need to show them everything, Chun said. We could still accept their protection, play weak, and avoid revealing our capabilities. No, Moreno said firmly. We've been waiting for this moment since we unified Earth. Waiting for the day when someone would threaten us, test us, force us to show the galaxy who we really are. The Keltharians have given us that opportunity. She stood, her expression hardening. Tomorrow, when their ultimatum expires, we'll give them an answer. Not with words, but with a demonstration. It's time the galaxy learned that humanity didn't survive a dozen extinction-level events. Didn't crawl back from nuclear war. Didn't unite a divided world. Just to bow to the first bully that showed up at our door. Admiral Kim pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's orbital space. The defense grid is fully operational. All platforms are armed and ready. The deep space sensors are tracking every Caltharian ship, and the message drones are prepared to broadcast to every inhabited system within 50 light years. Good, Marino said. Let's make sure that when we show ourselves to the galaxy, we do it properly. With strength, with restraint, but with absolute clarity. Earth will not be threatened. Earth will not submit. And anyone who thinks otherwise is about to learn a very expensive lesson. Outside the bunker, night fell across Geneva. The Caltharian ships orbited silently above, their crews confident in their superiority. They had no idea that below them, humanity was preparing to show them a truth that would echo across the galaxy. Never, ever mistake patience for weakness, or peace for powerlessness. The 72-hour deadline ticked closer, and with each passing minute, the stage was being set for a revelation that would change everything the galactic community thought they knew about the small blue planet called Earth. Asterisk. The awakening, the final hours, the 72nd hour, arrived with Earth's sunrise over Geneva. Ambassador Zenth stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Imperial Dominance, watching the blue planet below with satisfaction. Around him, his fleet had moved into attack formation during the night, a clear message to the humans below. 12 massive warships, bristling with weapons that could reduce cities to ash, hung in orbit like swords over humanity's throat. Still no response from the Earth government, Commander Vasp reported, though his voice carried a note of unease that Zenth chose to ignore. They're paralyzed by fear, Zenth replied confidently. Another hour, and they'll transmit their surrender. I've seen this pattern 100 times. They always break at the last moment. But down on Earth, in the underground command center, President Marino was anything but paralyzed. She stood before a massive tactical display, showing not just Earth's orbital space, but a three-dimensional map extending millions of kilometers in every direction. Around her, dozens of officers worked at stations that looked far more advanced than anything the Caltharians had seen during their tour. All defense platforms report ready status, Admiral Kim announced. The Mars garrison has achieved firing solution. Luna Base confirms all weapons hot. The asteroid belt installations are tracking targets. General Chun looked up from his own display. Madam President, the Caltharian fleet is powering up their weapons arrays. They're preparing to fire warning shots. Moreno checked the countdown timer. Right on schedule. How predictable. She touched her communication panel. This is President Marino to all stations. Execute protocol revelation. Let's show our guests what they've really stumbled into. The veil drops high above Earth. In the cold vacuum of space, something extraordinary began to happen. The stars seemed to shimmer and shift, as if reality itself was adjusting. Commander Vask noticed it first, his instruments screaming warnings that made no sense. Ambassador! Sensors are detecting massive energy signatures appearing all around us. They're coming from everywhere. Zenth rushed to the tactical display, and what he saw made his three eyes widen in disbelief. The space around Earth, which their sensors had mapped as empty just moments before, was suddenly filled with structures. Enormous defense platforms materialized out of stealth fields that shouldn't have been possible. They were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible approach to Earth. But that was just the beginning. On Earth's moon, what the Caltharians had assumed were simple research bases suddenly revealed their true nature. Massive doors slid open in the lunar surface, and from beneath them rose weapons batteries that dwarfed anything in the Caltharian arsenal. Each platform bristled with technology that made Zenth's warships look primitive by comparison. "This is impossible," Zenth whispered. "Our intelligence showed them to be a pre-contact species. They shouldn't have stealth technology. They shouldn't have weapons like this. There's more, Vask said, his voice shaking. I'm detecting power signatures from Mars and the asteroid belt. Ambassador, the entire inner system is armed. There are installations everywhere, all of them hidden until now. The tactical display updated, showing the true picture. Earth wasn't defended by a handful of primitive ships. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Hundreds of defense platforms, thousands of weapon batteries, all of them now targeting the Caltharian fleet with terrifying precision. Then the communication came through. President Marino's face appeared on every screen in the Caltharian fleet simultaneously, bypassing their security systems as if they weren't even there. Ambassador Zenth, she said calmly, I believe your ultimatum has expired. Before you do something that would result in the complete destruction of your fleet, I think we should have a conversation about some things you don't know about Earth. The truth revealed within the hour. Zenth found himself back in the Geneva Council chamber, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The humans were no longer playing at diplomacy. Guards stood at every entrance, not human guards, but powered armor suits that made his own bodyguards look like children's toys. The council members sat with the quiet confidence of people who held the cards. You lied to us, Zenth said, trying to maintain his dignity despite the fear creeping into his voice. You pretended to be primitive. We didn't lie, President Marino corrected. We simply didn't volunteer information you didn't ask for. Your assumptions about us or your own. She activated a holographic display. Let me tell you a story about Earth, Ambassador. A true story. The display showed images of Earth's history, but not the sanitized version the Caltharians had been shown before. This was the real story, the brutal truth of humanity's past. 400 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves, Marino began. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, environmental collapse. We fought wars that killed billions. We poisoned our own world. We stood on the edge of extinction, staring into the abyss we had created. The images showed mushroom clouds, devastated cities, mass graves. Zenth watched in growing horror. But we didn't die, Marino continued. We survived. And more than that, we learned. We unified our world, not through conquest, but through the shared understanding that we could never let ourselves become that destructive again. We developed technology to defend ourselves, yes, but we also developed the wisdom to know when not to use it. General Chun took over the presentation. For 2 centuries, we've watched the galaxy. Our deep space monitoring networks detected the Caltharian Empire long before you detected us. We've observed your expansion, your conquests, your protection rackets. We've seen how you treat species that accept your offer and how you destroy those who refuse. We made a choice, Admiral Kim added. We decided to appear weak while we prepared. We wanted to see who would come to our world and what they would offer. We wanted to test whether the galaxy was ready for humanity or whether we needed to remain hidden longer. Zenth felt his confidence crumbling. You've been watching us? For how long? Long enough, Marino said. Long enough to map every Caltharian military installation within 50 light years. Long enough to decode your communications and understand your tactics. Long enough to develop countermeasures for every weapon system in your arsenal. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. You threatened to burn our cities. You threatened to destroy our orbital facilities. You threatened to enslave our population. Do you understand what you've done? You've threatened a species that survived its own worst nightmare. You've threatened a civilization that rebuilt itself from the ashes of global war. You've threatened people who know exactly how far they can go before crossing the line into becoming monsters again. Asterisk the demonstration. I don't believe you, Zenth said, though his voice lacked conviction. Your technology might be more advanced than we thought, but the Keltharian Empire controls 400 systems. We have thousands of ships. You cannot stand against us." President Moreno nodded to Admiral Kim, who touched a control on her tablet. "Then let me show you something, Ambassador. Please direct your fleet's sensors to the following coordinates." She provided a set of numbers that corresponded to a point in deep space, roughly 3 light-years from Earth. Zenth reluctantly transmitted the coordinates to his ships. What they saw made Commander Vask's hands tremble on his controls. At those coordinates, impossible as it seemed, hung a human vessel. Not just any vessel, but a ship that made the entire Keltharian fleet look insignificant. It was a mobile fortress, 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and defenses that registered on sensors as barely comprehensible power levels. "That's the UHSV Remembrance," General Chun explained. "One of 7 dreadnoughts we built after the unification. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. We built them as reminders of what we're capable of, and as promises to ourselves never to use them except in defense." But here's the important part, Moreno added. "That ship made the journey from deep space to its current position in less than 6 hours. Your fastest ships would take days to cover the same distance. Our technology isn't just more advanced than yours, Ambassador. It's generations ahead. And we achieved this while you were still conquering your neighboring systems." Zenth stared at the images, his mind reeling. Everything the Keltharian Empire believed about galactic power structures was wrong. This primitive backwater planet, this species they had come to subjugate, was actually a sleeping giant that could crush them without effort. "What do you want?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. New understanding President Moreno's expression softened slightly. "We want what we've always wanted, Ambassador. Peace, cooperation, the chance to explore the galaxy without conquest or subjugation. But we also want respect. We want the galactic community to understand that Earth will not be threatened, will not be conquered, and will not stand by while others are enslaved." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful city beyond. "We've been preparing for this moment for 200 years. We knew eventually someone would find us and test us. You had the honor of being first. Now you have a choice to make." "What choice?" Zenth asked. "You can return to the Keltharian Empire and report what you've found here. You can tell them that Earth is not a primitive world to be exploited, but a power to be respected. You can help us establish proper diplomatic relations, the kind based on mutual respect rather than dominance." She turned back to face him. "Or you can choose conflict and learn firsthand why humanity learned to fear its own capacity for war." General Chun pulled up another display. "While you've been here, Ambassador, we've positioned assets near 17 Keltharian military installations. Not to attack, but to demonstrate that we can reach them. We've also transmitted this entire meeting to every inhabited system within our sensor range. The galaxy is learning right now that Earth exists and what we're capable of." "You're changing everything," Zenth said, understanding dawning. "The balance of power, the political structures." "We're introducing a new player to the game," Moreno agreed. "But we're not interested in empire building. We've learned that lesson too well. What we want is a seat at the table, the right to defend ourselves and others, and the freedom to explore without interference. In exchange, we offer technology sharing, defensive alliances, and the assurance that we will not seek conquest." She walked back to stand before the Keltharian ambassador. "You came here expecting to find weakness. Instead, you found strength tempered by wisdom. You came expecting subjugation. Instead, you found potential partnership. The question is whether you and your empire are wise enough to see the opportunity." The choice made Ambassador Zenth sat in silence for a long moment. his 3 eyes moving from face to face among the human council. He saw no bloodlust there, no desire for conquest. But he also saw absolute determination, the kind that comes from having survived the worst and emerged stronger. "I will return to the Empire," he said finally. "I will report everything I've seen, but I cannot promise how they will respond. The Keltharian Empire has never encountered a species like yours." "Then perhaps it's time your empire learned something new," President Marino said. "We're not asking you to abandon your ways entirely. We're asking you to recognize that in this galaxy, there's room for more than one form of strength. The Keltharians built their power through conquest. Humanity built ours through survival and unity. Both have value. Both deserve respect." She offered her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Take our offer back to your leaders. Tell them Earth extends an invitation, not for submission, but for dialogue. Tell them we're willing to share our technology, our insights, our hard-won wisdom about the price of war and the value of peace. But also tell them that any future threats against Earth or our allies will be met with the full force of everything we've built." Zenth looked at her hand for a moment, then reached out and clasped it awkwardly. It was the first time in Keltharian history that such a gesture had been made between the Empire and another species as equals. As the Keltharian fleet prepared to depart Earth's system, now fully aware of the hundreds of hidden weapons tracking their every movement, Commander Vask spoke quietly to his ambassador. "We almost made a terrible mistake." Zenth nodded slowly, watching Earth recede on the view screen. "Yes, but perhaps we've gained something more valuable than another conquest. We've learned that strength comes in many forms, and that the most dangerous opponent is the one who has learned restraint." Back on Earth, President Moreno stood with her council, watching the alien ships disappear into the distance. "Do you think they'll come back peacefully?" Admiral Kim asked. Moreno smiled. "I think we've given them a choice, and I think they're smart enough to make the right one. But even if they're not, we're ready. We've been ready for a long time." General Chun raised a glass. "To humanity. May we never forget the lessons that brought us here, and may we never have to fully demonstrate what those lessons cost." Around the world, in secret installations and hidden facilities, human defenders stood down from alert status. The veil had been lifted. Earth's secret was out, and the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again.